my journey of healing through the grace of God begun on a normal, routine yearly doctor's exam. All numbers were looking decent except one, as we miss one annual checkup due to COVID the year before. The number that clearly stood out was the PSA number related to my prostate. The number was very high at 32, well beyond all safe parameters, as the regular and normal number should be no higher than 4 or 5. This, of course, set up a big warning sign, and we needed to make sure that it was not a fluke. Aaron and I proceeded to check with a urologist doctor and consulted with him, and he led us to do a biopsy, not only one, but 5 of them in my prostate. As I am going through the procedure, I must admit that it was the most intense pain that I felt in my body. That had to be done 5 times in my prostate. All 5 of them came back at the high level of 32, and the procedure really left me in deep physical pain. After meeting with the urologist and discussing the options to take, one of the things that he informed us was that this was a very aggressive cancer and not curable at the highest level of 4, and he indicated that I may have a few years to live, but not guarantees that would be so. He said for me to enjoy life and travel as much as I could, and he led me to an oncologist for the cancer treatment that will follow. From that day forward, my faith in God was ferocious, and any scriptures on healing, faith, and the mercy of God was in my mind night and day. I was always a Christian person, as I was baptized in 2002 and received the Lord in my life then. I was not a perfect Christian, and with the grace of God that I'm able to write these lines to you, I must emphasize that Erin is a blessing that God has sent in my life, and am grateful that she is by my side battling this disease each step of the way. The treatment to follow was chemo, and the other option was taking a pill as a hormone treatment. After asking the oncologist directly what would be the best path to follow, he said that his own father had prostate cancer and he opted to do the chemo for his dad. That was a good enough answer for me, besides the fact that chemo was a more established way of fighting the cancer and perhaps more aggressive. Now is all about the faith in God and His mercy as we proceeded to enter the chemo phase. I have no concept of what the next procedure would be, but first was a bone scan, a CT scan, and a PET scan to see where the cancer was through my body. In the meanwhile, there were also all kinds of shots and the fear of the unknown, of course. The first scan came called the CT scan, and I needed to drink this liquid about 2 hours before the procedure right there at the hospital. It was a very confusing day, as it was in December, and COVID in the hospital was very vital. Needless to say, a 2.5-hour procedure went from to a 4 to 5 hour scan, with the person doing it with an attitude that was not very professional, especially the way he communicated with patients. Of course, I understood that they were probably being worked hard, with many hours behind them. Needless to say, that created a kind of fear in my mind, as this was not a very good start to the chemo phase. I even remember panicking a bit, but once again, Erin was on my side, trying to make me see the clarity of things. After a long wait and drinking the shake that was part of the procedure, the time to meet this guy and his scan came. It was not pleasant, and he made it worse by not being able to find my vein and needed to call a nurse to get blood from me. That added another hour. I remember it being very cold and had to lay down in still and uncomfortable positions, and for a long time in so many different ways under this machine that your body had to go through. Finally, the nightmare was over. The bone scan was a better experience. with the person doing it was a total professional and made the procedure go without a problem. The PET scan went smoothly as well, remembering going outside on this truck that had all this equipment on it and still in my mind seem a bit subreal. After the scans were done, they found cancer that spread on my left hip, right rib, and left ankle in my bones. But they did not see that the cancer spread on vital organs. And that was the greatest news that I got during this dark period given to me by the urologist, finally a light in the tunnel. Moving on to the chemo procedure, and with my faith in God at its highest, I was taken to this big room with IV hookups on every separate station. I met Willie, a very professional nurse, and led me to each step of the way in a very professional manner. Hooking up the IV in my left top hand on the vein, with first injecting the necessary liquids, medicine, and proteins for the body to prepare it for the chemo, and then the chemo itself. The first procedure took about 4 hours. Remembering all the nurses working the floor, asking me if I was okay, as they knew this was my first time. The great news after the first chemo was that the PSA went from 32 to 8, a miracle in itself. I was so happy to hear that great news. In the meanwhile, I kept on playing tennis, and my body did not feel the repercussion of the chemo yet. My second chemo came after 3 weeks, and once again it took about 4 hours with a different nurse, but a great professional outcome. My tennis was normal, and my PSA level went from 8 to 4. My third chemo came 3 weeks after the same good results, and my PSA level went from 4 to 1, and playing tennis was still great. And my fourth chemo came, and the chemo or PSA level was down to 0.1 after this chemo. I felt that my stamina on the tennis courts was beginning to get affected, as it became very difficult to play at the same level. But I kept playing mainly with Aaron, and I would challenge myself mentally so that I can play hard at least for an hour. After the fourth chemo, I noticed my nails going darker, my taste buds almost non-existing, especially 2 days after the chemo procedure. In those 2 or 3 days, my body will literally shut down with fatigue, lack of sleep, no hunger, and just an intense pain going through my body. It would be like they exploded a nuclear bomb inside of me and the mental and physical intense pain that followed it. I will try to stay positive mentally, as it would also affect my moods. The positive about this chemo was that it did not vomit, and that my hair that I always kept short was barely noticeable when I lost it. Am the captain of a couple of USTA teams, as it did not affect me as I was able to be at the matches, except for the last chemo that really got me. It is great being with the guys in competition, and they are so supportive of me that I'm really grateful. Getting back to competitive tennis will be a slow process, and I will take step by step to get my endurance back to play competitive. I want to show that by me writing these will help other people in my position to try to get back to play competitive again. As of now, I will be going through some more scans to determine what the cancer is doing to my body, and am hoping that we can get it under submission, but if not, radiation will come into play. But that is another topic that I will be writing about. If it comes down to it,